Okay, what do we have here? Such a tableau. This is an example of how you can literally ratchet up the intensivity of your plantings, in a garden situation. And in a few minutes I'll talk to you about an analogous thing on a field scale. But what have we got here? We've got a 5-foot wide bed with interspersed rows, fruit tree, rows, fruit tree going down the line, and then the space available on the side of the bed here and over there. So we have 3 rows of lettuce on each side of the bed. This is a beautiful leaf lettuce called panisse. Just kind of melt in your mouth. And this is a butterhead lettuce over there. So last year we planted trees and roses. They grew well. And we had a side crop as well. Let me just note that this bed, if you're going to plant, the more intensively you're going to plant, the deeper your initial digging needs to be to facilitate roots going down and not horizontally. You can't just jam a bunch of stuff together and get good results. You've got to treat the soil accordingly, so that a liberal application of compost, perhaps a green manure cover crop, turned into the soil, a deep digging of the bed, and then and only then can you plant. So we planted the trees and roses last year. Last summer we had a side crop of flowers in here, and this spring we're having a lettuce, and in about 10-20 days these will be mature, be cropped out, and then we'll insert peppers, probably 3 rows of peppers on each side, 60 feet down the line like that, and then we'll probably be able to intercrop in this intricate fashion here for another, I'm going to say 2, 3, arguably 4 years before the trees and roses take over the available space both above and beyond the ground. And even at that, a few more years down the line, we'll probably have to give these roses a hard pruning and relocate them to another bed as the trees take over both the above and below ground space. But this is a really beautiful example of intensive gardening. Okay, let's look a little more at the schematic here, and then let's flip the scene to what might be possible about ratcheting up intensivity on a field scale. One of the dividends of this interplanting, we've got roses, apples, roses, apples, rinse, repeat, going down a line like that. And a side crop here, it could be flowers, but right now it's lettuce, and coming soon to a bed near you, peppers. Is you put out a pretty penny to buy a fruit tree. These days, lamentably, it'll be 40, 50, 60 bucks a pop. Under the best of conditions, basically, fruit trees don't really fruit until they've made all of their structural parts, the entire root system, the branch and shoot system, leaves, and then they devote carbohydrates to fruit. And that's going to be 3 to 5 years for some fruit set on even a dwarf tree, and maybe longer. So the idea here is to generate some income on any given footage in the interim. So right from the get-go here, we've got lettuce. You're going to be selling your lettuce, say, in a direct market situation, $1, $1.50, $2 a head. We've got 300 or 400 lettuces in here. I don't want to sound like too much of a craven capitalist, but ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And then in the intermediate term, even as we speak, these 2-year-old roses are starting to bud up. So we'll have, I'm going to say 10, 15, 20 blooms of a high dollar value flower, roses, sell for $1 or $2 a stem. And you'll have that 2, 3, even 4 times a year with the repeat blooming nature of roses. So again, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And then eventually the apples will come along. So I have seen this done quite successfully on a small orchard scale. One that comes to mind is driving down Highway 101 just south of San Luis Obispo. There was about a 10-acre planting of dwarf apples. And for the first 3 years, they ran winter squash in the alleys, which were about 10, 12 feet wide between the rows of trees, and did quite well. And then they went to growing bush peas in the spring, and that worked for a few years. And eventually, again, the canopy and the root mass of the fruit trees take over the landscape. But in the interim, you're generating some income. Harkening back to the 1800s, early 1900s, orchards around California, but more specifically down just south of us in the Pajaro Valley, they would plant the big old standard sized trees, apples and mostly yellow Newtown pippin, and they would graze sheep or cattle under them, and again generated income in the interim till those big old trees wouldn't really have any appreciable fruit before 10 or 15 years of age. Of course, the browse line was pretty high with those cows and sheep like that, but hey, it worked. So one thing you might just think about if you want to go in this direction of a little more intensive of an orchard planting, a little earlier recompense in terms of income, and that would be to just do something simple. For instance, a single row of flowers right on the outside of the tree bed. Now usually you'll have your tree bed be 5, 6, 7 feet wide, and your alley width is variable, but basically it's usually a little wider than whatever needs to get down the row, and often 8, 10, 12 feet. So on the edge of the 5, 6, 7 foot tree bed, you could plant a single row of a simple flower. It could be sunflowers, it could be cornflowers, zinnias work well, and you will get a profuse amount of blooms. And in the case of the sunflower, I find it quite ridiculous that even at this quote-unquote late date, sunflowers, single stem sunflowers, are still trending, often selling for 75 cents a buck a pop like that. There's a whole new class of zinnias, smaller and more tasteful with their colors. Floret Flowers has them, Johnny's has them, and you should check them out. Zinnias, I'm going to say they win the race of most flowers produced over the longest period of time in a season. They really are producers, flower factories like that. Another dividend from this simple single side row planting is that you are attracting pollinators. If you pick species that bloom in the spring, especially, that can be attracted to the flowers for their pollen and nectar, food, and then will linger to pollinate your fruit trees and set a crop for you. So it's something you want to think about, maybe, depending on your scale. And also, the more intensively you are growing, the more attentive you need to be to detail. And it's going to require more frequent inputs of care and labor than if you just went with trees.